Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is my good friend Tom Sturtevant, who is a member of Veterans for Peace, and he's from Winthrop, Maine. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. What did you do for your career, Tom? What was your job?
I was a high school English teacher, just like Garrison Keeler.
At what school did you teach?
And I taught at Coney High School for 24 years, and I also taught down in Connecticut for 3 years, in Branford, Connecticut. English.
And when did you join Veterans for Peace?
I joined Veterans for Peace 25 years ago. That was the time when Jerry Genesio and 4 other veterans decided to go and try to form a chapter or form Veterans for Peace.
I understand it was founded at a Denny's restaurant in just at the Lewiston-Auburn border, right by the bridge.
Yeah, those 5 veterans. I wasn't in on that meeting at the restaurant, but we did have a meeting at a lovely church near Lake Auburn in Auburn, Maine, back 25 years ago. That's where 24 of us got together and decided to go with it.
And then Veterans for Peace went on to become a national organization.
That's correct. First, we moved out of Portland, Maine. Veterans for Peace was founded in Maine. Then we went to Washington, D.C., and then I guess we decided that we'd get more veterans and have more chapters if we moved to the center of the country. So the Veterans for Peace is now in St. Louis.
The national headquarters.
National headquarters of St. Louis, yeah.
And so this year, the 25th anniversary, every year there's a national convention, but this year it's going to be held in Maine.
That's right. It's coming back home. It started in Maine 25 years ago.
So when and where will the convention be held?
The convention will be held in the city of Portland at the Holiday Inn by the Bay on August 25 through 29. And we hope to have a lot of veterans there, members of Veterans for Peace. It's a long haul from the West Coast, but we hope that a lot of veterans will come and be at our convention.
And of course, we're extending an invitation to veterans around Maine to come as well. You don't have to belong to the organization to come, right?
That's true, but there's certain activities they will not be permitted to participate in.
Well, that's just the business meeting.
Yeah, that's right.
But all the rest of the convention is open to any veteran that would like to come.
There will be some fees if you want to participate in the lobster bake Friday night. That'll cost you, I think it's $45. If you want to participate in the banquet, you'll have to pay something for the banquet. But there's you can listen to you can go to some of the workshops. There'll be 30 workshops in the hotel, and you can go to those.
Yeah. Now the banquet, it's going to have quite some celebrities. I understand that. Tell us about the speakers and singers of note that will be at the banquet.
Okay, there'll be the principal speaker, the keynote speaker will be Chris Hedges, and he's the author of a couple of books that I've read. One is the War is the, I can't remember the title, War is that Gives Us Meaning, or something like that. And there'll be a singer from the Peter, Paul, and
Mary.
Stuckey group, singing
Noel,
group.
Paul, Stuckey.
Yeah,
with Peter, Paul, and Mary. Yeah.
And they'll be there, and they'll probably give out some awards at that banquet too.
Yeah. You served as a veteran during the Korean War, correct?
That is, yes. Mm-hmm.
What branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Navy. And I don't know, I hesitate to talk about it because of what we did to the country of Korea. But I was...
what was your job during that time?
I was what they called in the Navy a twidget. A twidget is an aviation electronic technician. And I was with a tailhook squadron that was on a ship, the USS Essex.
Was that an aircraft carrier?
Aircraft carrier, wooden deck, and I serviced propeller planes that provided close air support to Marines and Army combat personnel. And we also bombed, the squadron also bombed targets, lines of communication. I remember seeing in the ready room blown up photographs of locomotives that we blew up. And at the end, I guess, near the war, they were blowing up ox carts, presumably filled with ammunition for the Korean troops. We devastated that country, turned it into a desert, and we deliberately, at least the Air Force did.
You're talking about North Korea?
North Korea deliberately bombed the dams in North Korea. Bombs that destroyed the dams that provided water and power for North Korea and flooded the rice paddies down below. The idea being that you destroy the rice crop, you would destroy the ability of the North Koreans to survive. Rice was the staple, and if you didn't have rice, they would starve to death.
Isn't that illegal under the UN?
Yes, it is international. It violates international law.
To do what?
To destroy food supplies.
Yeah. I once heard you say that, and I've read this since, that the U.S. during that Korean War bombed every single standing building, every structure above ground in North Korea.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I'm not sure if were they able to destroy every single structure, and I think a lot of the North Korean army went underground. They had huge caves, as I understand it. So, but they turned North Korea into a desert, in my opinion.
I've read that not only the North Korean military went underground, but the people had to live underground.
Yeah.
And they had to live underground all day long, and then in the night they would go out and try to tend their gardens so they could grow food during that time.
I'm not too sure about how the civilians fared, but I know that the army went underground, the North Korean army.
At the time when you were on that aircraft carrier that was bombing North Korea, did you have any doubts or thoughts about any of that as you do today?
Well, I was a high school student during World War II, and I remember writing the U.S. military personnel wrote stuff on the bombs. Messages on the bombs that they were going to drop on Tokyo or Germany. And I remember there was some writing on the bombs on the carrier as they wheeled the bombs out to attach to the airplanes. Some Navy personnel wrote stuff on the bombs. But my heart wasn't in it.
Do you remember some of the things they wrote?
No, I don't. No. But they wrote stuff on the bombs, and I said to myself, I don't have any enmity, any hatred of North Koreans. And I began to think a little bit more about what we were doing there. And finally, when I came home, I began to read about the origins of the Korean War, and I said to myself, that was a bad war.
What made you come to that conclusion? What did you learn that made you feel that way?
Well, there was a book written called The Forgotten War by John Holliday and Bruce Cummings. Bruce Cummings is, in my opinion, probably the nation's expert on the Korean War. And he described how the country of Korea was divided into two parts, North Korea and South Korea, by two Americans, without any consultation of the Korean people.
One of those Americans was, at that time, a colonel by the name of Dean Rusk.
That's true.
Who later became Secretary of State.
That's right.
Under the Johnson administration,
That's right.
I think. Yeah.
It even goes back further than that. And that's the Treaty of Portsmouth, which Teddy Roosevelt had a hand in dealing with the Russians and the Japanese after the Russo-Japanese War, in which he allowed the Japanese to occupy Korea from 1905 to 1945 when Japan was defeated, without consultation of the Korean people at all.
And the Japanese Imperial Army occupying Korea was brutal towards...
Brutal, terribly cruel, terribly cruel. Ask any Korean who has a sense of history today, and they don't think too much of the Japanese.
Right. And in fact, after the Korean War was over, the United States took control of Korea, and they put Korean collaborators with the Japanese occupation. They put them in charge of South Korea.
That's correct.
And they started a lineage of right-wing dictatorships that
Yeah.
still exist today.
Autocrats and dictators.
Yeah.
Even Sigmund Rhee. Anybody who opposed him, he had him shot.
He was the first president.
That's right. He lived most of his life in New Jersey, in Princeton, New Jersey, and didn't have to endure the cruelties and the excesses of the Japanese occupation, living in comfort in Princeton, New Jersey.
Yeah. And so then he was brought to South Korea after
That's
the war, put in charge,
Right.
and became a right-wing dictator.
Right.
And today there's now a right-wing government in South Korea that the United States really controls.
That's correct.
Now, you went to Korea a couple of years ago. In fact,
Yeah.
last year
April of 2009.
we went together.
Yeah.
And you got to go around the country and you saw the situation of expanding U.S. military today. What's going on in Korea today?
Well, I think what's going on is a terrible campaign of war scare. I think the current head of South Korea is scaring the people into thinking that the North is going to invade South Korea. And the recent sinking of a South Korean naval vessel gave us an idea of what's happening. I myself do not believe the official reports that the North Korea sunk or sank a South Korean naval vessel. The internet is filled with different stories about the sinking. And anybody who wants to learn the opposite point of view, which is not getting through to the American public about the sinking, ought to check out some of those websites.
Well, let me add there that, in fact, South Korean military officials, right after the incident, called it an accident and said publicly on South Korean television that there was no way that North Korea was involved. And it wasn't until days later that they changed the story, saying, North Korea sunk it. In fact, one of the members of the South Korean military commission that investigated said that in a news conference, said that it was a case of running aground on rocky shoals, and the ship broke up.
Yes.
Because it ran aground, and he was able to provide, I think, a strong documentation.
Yeah.
But the United States was interested in once more creating this enemy out of North Korea, and they got the South Korean government to change the story days later. Isn't that true?
Yes. What gets me is it's so reminiscent of the way the United States gets involved in wars. It goes all the way back to the sinking of the Maine.
Tell us about that.
The Maine was a so-called battleship sent by Teddy Roosevelt to Havana Harbor. And it blew up. And Teddy Roosevelt and his jingoists, they called them jingoists in those days, believed that it was sunk by the Spaniards. And it come to find out, and I think the final conclusion is that it was sunk not by the Spaniards, by sabotage or anything like that, but by a bunker, the coal bunker being next to the ammunition section of the ship. It got overheated.
So it was an accident.
It was an accident. It blew up.
But the U.S. used that as a pretext to start the Spanish-American War.
Just like the Tonkin Gulf, too.
In the Vietnam War.
Right. So
why is the United States so interested in maintaining military presence in Korea? Why? What's the strategic...
Well, I think they're uptight about China being an economic rival. And if they can control what goes on in the China Seas, that is helpful. So they're building a base on a beautiful island that, from my understanding, I've never been there, Jeju Island, Jeju, where the people are very peaceful. They grow tangerines, as I understand it, and dive. I'm not sure what they dive for. Not die, but dive. Very peaceful island, and they want to create a base for American missile destroyers so they could keep an eye on China and perhaps take out any Chinese missiles.
Well, actually, the Aegis destroyers made at Bath Iron Works would be deployed at this base on Jeju Island.
Most Maine people don't even know that.
Yeah. The divers you were talking about, they're called the sea diving women, old women in their 70s and 80s that dive to the bottom of the ocean and collect shells with, and bring it back and sell it for food. Mm-hmm. I'm talking to Tom Sturtevant, who's a longtime founding member of Veterans for Peace, which was created here in Maine and then became a national organization this August 25th through 29th. The 25th Annual National Convention will be held in Portland at the Holiday Inn by the Bay. So veterans from around the country will be coming to the National Convention. And veterans in Maine are invited to come to that convention. The website for Veterans for Peace is www.veteransforpeace.org, veteransforpeace.org, and you can go there and find out more information about the convention. Let's talk a bit more about the convention, Tom. So it's going to begin on the 25th, and then the 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th. On the 26th, there's a community event that's going to be held in Portland.
That's right.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's a public meeting, and it'll have NAACP folks there, Native Americans, labor organizations, excuse me, and representatives of Portland's immigrant groups, the Sudanese and other groups.
Do you know where it's going to be held? It's
going to be held at the Unitarian Church, as I understand it, on Congress Street, right next to City Hall.
Okay.
And it's free.
So this is an event to bring out the community. I understand Representative Bob Filner, a congressman from San Diego, California. He's the chair of the House Veteran Affairs Committee. He's going to be there speaking, as well as other people, as you said. And also Inanna, the drumming group, who's well known in Maine, Sisters in Rhythm they're called. They're going to be performing at that event too. On Friday, there's going to be several plenaries on different topics at the Holiday Inn. One of them called Strengthening Our Movement, linking war and the economic crisis at home, trying to show the connection between endless war spending and the economic collapse in 45 states across the country. And then on Saturday the 28th, as you said, there's going to be a banquet with Chris Hedges and Noel Paul Stuckey from Peter, Paul, and Mary. They'll be there as well. Mm-hmm. And then on Sunday, there's a kind of ending event. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, I don't think a Veterans for Peace convention would be a convention without some kind of a protest or public statement. And so we'll be starting from the hotel, going up to Post Office Square, where we'll probably have some public speaking and a protest about the Afghan and Iraq wars.
So that's going to be a march from the hotel to this post office park, and then speakers and music. And included in those speakers will be the well-known peace activist Kathy Kelly, and also the singing group Emma's Revolution, which is very popular to women that do political music.
They can belt them out too.
Yeah, they're very good. So people are invited to come to that event. I want to get back to you for a minute. And
sure.
Tell me, why did you join Veterans for Peace 25 years ago? What was it that pulled you into this organization?
I guess you could blame it on my imagination. In 1985, the U.S. was fooling around down in Central America. And I read the newspaper accounts of what the military was doing down there, helping the Contras, helping the Contras kill peasants, labor union leaders, people on the far left. And after what I had learned about what had happened in Korea and in Vietnam, I saw a small item in the newspaper about an organization called Veterans for Peace starting. And I said to myself, that's for me. So I began, reading about how the U.S. military hurt people really bothered me, so I decided to join. So I went to that first meeting in Auburn, Maine. Beautiful July day in the church opposite Lake Auburn. Beautiful day. And there were about 23 or 24 of us there. And it made me feel good.
What kind of people are members of Veterans for Peace today? Are they all World War II and Korean veterans?
Well, the World War II veterans, most of them have died out. There are some of us in the Korean War still around. But I would say the most of the energy comes from the Vietnam War veterans. However, Iraq War veterans are beginning to think about what they have been doing in Iraq. And we're helping them. We're sort of subsidizing the Iraq veterans for peace. And I'm sure some of them will be at our convention.
Oh yeah, I know that, yeah. They surely will. They've created their own sort of sister organization called Iraq Veterans Against the War.
Right.
But as you say, it's being nurtured by Veterans for Peace. Today, the situation today, what do you think are the key concerns today of Veterans for Peace? What are the key issues that VFP is working on today?
Well, one of our priorities is the spending of the money for the wars. I believe it amounts to about $8 billion a month, something like that. Billions of dollars. And I see the suffering back here in the United States. 10% unemployment across the country. I see schools being defunded. In my own town of Winthrop, they chopped, I don't know how many millions of dollars from the education budget. All of the things that mean something to us are being defunded. They're not being taken care of. So I see the war as directly affecting our ability to spend for the things that we need. And that means infrastructure, education, and dealing with global warming. I believe that perhaps if they can build cell phone towers on most of the hills in Maine, at least in the central and southern portions, why can't they put up wind turbines? And I always recall that when my father, a 9th grade dropout, said during the Depression that the thing that got us out of the Depression was the war. In other words, the war put people to work. I remember a neighbor going down to BIW, working at the shipyard. Why can't we spend that same amount of money for wind turbines, solar arrays, in conservation, things like that? Spend a huge amount of money on alternate means of energy to get us away from the oil.
Public transportation.
Public transportation.
You know, the old timers say that there used to be a rail system in Maine that connected every corner of the...
That's right.
Just this past weekend, I was in Madawaska for a Gagnon family reunion, and I saw the old train station in Madawaska that clearly at one time served the people in that community. So there used to be rail all over the state. Why couldn't people at places like Bath Iron Works be building a rail system?
Good thought.
And in fact, one of the speakers we're going to have at the Veterans for Peace Convention at the end of August is the director of National Priorities Project, who does studies on how we could be spending our money. And in a study that they're connected to, they say that, yes, it's true that you spend $1 billion at a place like BIW, you create 8,500 jobs. But if you built rail with that same $1 billion at a BIW, you'd create 19,000 jobs per billion. Now, which would you rather have? 8,500 jobs building weapons for endless war, or 19,000 jobs building rail systems that help solve for the energy crisis, that help solve for climate change and all that kind of stuff.
You took the words right out of my mouth. We cannot have guns and butter. If you have more guns, and I believe we have more guns, 50% of every tax dollar in discretionary spending we send to Washington goes to the military. And I always laugh, I don't know whether to laugh or to cry when I see that amount of money, especially during the debate on Medicare, Medicaid. Somebody said, I guess it might have been one of our senators, $1 trillion in 10 years for medical care. We spend $1 trillion per year just on the military. That includes NASA, all the spending on the Department of Energy, veterans benefits, that's part of war, and those things.
And the military budget.
And the military budget, yeah.
I was just going to ask you, actually, how would you say that our two senators and our two representatives from Maine are doing on these war issues today?
Well, I'm disappointed, especially with our Representative Pingree. A recent vote, she voted for increased funding for the Afghan war. But the bill was tied, for some reason or other, to other benefits, one of them being don't ask, don't tell, to get rid of that. If that was such an important bill, why didn't they put that on a separate bill? So they attach this war funding bill with other things that it's very difficult for a representative to pass up. I must say that Mike Michaud voted correctly.
He voted against it.
That's right. And Snow and Collins, they've been, in my opinion, rather hawkish. And I wish that they were more dovish because we can't have guns and butter. We just cannot have that.
Well, how do we change all of this stuff?
Well, it starts back in our local towns and cities, getting town councils, city councils, and select people to vote, somehow vote for resolutions stopping the funding of the wars. And that's where it starts, at the grassroots. But the people are either so inattentive or so bored or are ignorant of where our money is going that very few people are willing to go out and do something. And I think apathy perhaps is one of the things.
Very recently, the Portland City Council voted on a resolution saying, bring our war dollars home.
That's right. We tried it in Winthrop, and the town council did not go for it. I think it was split pretty evenly.
Well, Tom, thanks very much. Again, the National Veterans for Peace Convention, the 25th anniversary celebration, will be held in Portland at the Holiday Inn by the Bay on August 25th through 29th. Veterans all over Maine, whether you're a member or not, are invited to come to this. There's going to be veterans from all over the United States coming to this convention. For more information, go to www.veteransforpeace.org, veteransforpeace.org. And Tom, thank you so much for coming. You know, people often say to veterans, thank you for your service, but I want to say this to you. Thank you for your work in the peace movement, in the Veterans for Peace movement. I think it's been absolutely important. You're known in this state as one of the great leaders of Maine Veterans for Peace, and it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You make my day.
You make mine too. And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.